All right. So, hello everybody. Thank you for staying for the last talk of this conference. All right. My name is Blerim, and I work for Netways, a company located in Germany and dedicated to open source software. Formerly, I've been a systems engineer. Currently, I'm working as a product manager, caring for partners, integrations, and this kind of stuff. But today, I don't want to talk about myself. I want you to introduce Dave. Dave is in his early 20s, and he's just joined a IT company. He's highly motivated. He's working there for a couple of weeks now, had some experience in troubleshooting stuff, and he's still learning new things. And his goal is to be one of the best operators the company has ever seen. So that's a goal that probably some of us still have, and that's a good thing, I think. So he started learning and had a couple of interesting projects, and now has a new project, which is pretty big for him now with his experience level. And he has to build a web application infrastructure for a new customer. So in simple, the infrastructure is just a couple of web servers and a couple of database servers. It's a pretty simple setup, so just a couple of servers, not many dependencies, but Dave is pretty proud of it because this was his first big project in the company, and everything works as expected. And that makes Dave happy because the web application works, the customer is pretty happy with it. And yeah, this brings even more motivation to Dave because this is his first big success. Yeah, but IT wouldn't be IT if there was no failure. So usually it's just a matter of time until something fails or starts to fail. And this is the case for Dave's infrastructure as well. So at some point, 3 months later, after he successfully built the infrastructure, something starts failing. And it's just sporadically. So it's not failing all the time, it's just failing sometimes, and not in a pattern that you could just see. It's just sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So Dave starts with his usual troubleshooting skills that he has learned from his colleagues. And the first tip he got when he started was that you need monitoring. If you're building something in IT, you need to monitor it. Otherwise, as we have learned, it's just a matter of time until something starts to fail. You wouldn't be able to see if something fails. So he has been recommended Izinga by Eve, his colleague, because it's an independent view. So Eve tells him, yeah, you need a monitoring not only from inside the application, but you also need a view from the outside. And that totally makes sense. So Dave uses this and has his independent view. He has a nice overview over all services running on his servers. And he gets alerts when something went wrong. And in fact, in this case, when the web application starts to fail, Dave gets alerts before the customer recognizes, which is an important thing because you don't want your customer to tell you, hey, your infrastructure is not working. You should be able to recognize this before the customer does. So yeah, Dave gets these alerts and everything is nice, and he sees that the web application sometimes is not working, there is no pattern in it. He sees that sometimes there's something failing in MySQL, and this availability monitoring helps him to just recognize that there is something wrong. But what it doesn't tell Dave is that what is causing these errors. So he sees that there is something wrong, but he doesn't see the root cause of this. So he goes to his next colleague, which is Ben, and Ben tells him, yeah, that's obvious. You need logging, because logging is the truth. Logging can tell you everything about everything in your infrastructure. So in the best case, you would need centralized logging because you have so many servers, Dave, and you need to centralize these log messages because you want to have a deep insight into what is happening in your infrastructure, and that cannot be given to you by availability monitoring. So Dave uses these logging mechanisms. He uses the Elastic Stack for that, which is pretty popular for this case. He has an overall overview over all logs of all machines. He's kind of overwhelmed by all these log files and all these messages. He's feeling like he's trying to find the needle in the haystack, but he cannot find any error messages, and he cannot find any warnings, and he cannot find anything that he can use to find this root cause. So Dave realizes that he doesn't not only need the whole bunch of logs, he also needs to know what he's looking for. Otherwise, he's not even knowing that what this needle in the haystack is even looking like he's looking for. That's the next thing Dave learns. And then, he went to his next colleague, which is Laura. And Laura tells Dave, this is nice and good what you did until now, but what you need is graphing. So Dave starts investigating, and he's got recommended graphite as a graphing solution for his needs, and so he starts working with it, and he uses his availability monitoring to push the metrics into graphite. He sees how the application performs. So he can exactly see how performance is going and if things are working well and what happens if something fails, how graphs do look like, and he can see how the history of the application looks like. So Dave tries to search for anomalies in his graphs, and he actually can find some, but with graphite only, he has just 2 bad dashboards. He knows that everything is right, but so he can see some patterns, but he still doesn't know what is the root cause of his problem. So he has lots of monitoring around, and he has availability monitoring, he has lots of logs, he has lots of graphing, but he's still not able to find the root cause of the problem. He knows that it's something with MySQL, and it's something that breaks the web application, but what is it? And at some point, Dave has the idea that maybe all these monitoring tools he has, maybe he just needs to combine them somehow in an overview of everything. And that's when he came up with Grafana. The first thing he starts with is graphite, obviously, because it's a standard data source for Grafana, and he gets some nice graphs. He has beautiful dashboards. He investigates very much time in these dashboards, and he can see that, in this graph the load sometimes drops, and the used memory sometimes drops. There is no exact pattern in there, but at least he can see what is happening. And he uses Grafana because Grafana has lots of data sources. These are only the ones that are shipped by default. There are plenty more that you can use as plugins to extend it. For Dave, only 2 are interesting because his availability monitoring is storing metrics into Graphite. And it's storing data into Elasticsearch. And the logs are also stored in the Elasticsearch because he's using Elastic Stack. So he starts with his availability monitoring. Start from the beginning. What's about the notifications? I don't know if you can read that or see that because the lines are pretty thin. These are standard annotations based on Elasticsearch as data source. And we're looking just at the load graph because this is the pattern where we can see best what's happening. And we can see here, every time the load drops, he gets a notification that the web application isn't working. So this is the point where Dave is convinced that, okay, these load graphs has to do something with my notifications I'm getting and the breaking web application. So he's able to verify that these notifications are exactly, has something to do with the load. The next thing he does is he adds some more data from his logging management, which is stored in Elasticsearch. And he starts with the most obvious thing, what about the users that log in? Most of the time, users break things. So he starts displaying the SSH logins of users of all these machines. Again, we just look at the load graph. So he gets 2 user logins, and this one looks strange because it happens right before something breaks. So he gets suspicious, and he extends his annotations with some more information to not see that there is a user login, but he also wants to see who exactly logged in. He was a little bit disappointed to see that it was him logging in, probably just debugging. And there's also another login here that has nothing to do with the patterns. So yeah, probably most of the time users cause errors, but this time it has to be something different. So he tries something else. So there are lots of things happening on these machines, but not so many things that actually do changes. But one thing that actually does changes is the configuration management tool. So he starts building a theory about configuration management tool, doing some changes. So he adds some more annotations to his graphs, showing him the Puppet runs that are happening on the machine. And this is not really useful because he sees, yeah, Puppet is running every 15 minutes. Thanks for that. There's not really a point in displaying every Puppet run, but he learns that probably he can filter the logs in only those Puppet runs that are actually doing changes. And he does that, and he gets a new graph where he can see that there are actually Puppet runs that do changes only at these times when the load drops. So there is a Puppet run right here, and it does something, and the load drops. And the next Puppet run, when the next Puppet run happens, the load goes up again. So this looks pretty good to him because this may be the cause of his root of his problem. So he adds some more information to it to have some more value out of these graphs, and maybe to find the root cause and to add some more value. I don't know if you can read that. I'll read it out loud. Here it says that, Puppet made some changes, and the ownership of the directory varlib MySQL was changed from MySQL to user root. So who knows what happens if that is happening? So MySQL will continue to run. You won't see anything in the logs. You will see, however, failures if you try to select anything or insert anything. But that's the only place where you see anything, if that happens during runtime. If the change is reverted by Puppet again and changed to the owner of MySQL, everything will just continue working as it should. So there's no logging anywhere. You will get notifications probably from the availability monitoring because the check will fail. But it's a pretty tricky thing to find out. So that's the story of Dave and how he found the root cause of his problem by combining multiple data sources and adding just more value to his graphs, to not look only to certain data, but combine all the data he has. So the key takeaway of this is that you probably should add more value to your graphs and just let your graphs tell you stories about what is happening in your infrastructure. And Grafana is an excellent tool to do this. This was just a simple example to demonstrate how this can work. There's much more you can do with multiple data sources combined in one view. There's not just annotations, you also combine them in queries. And that's how Dave found his problem. So one last thing, I'm aware that there are plenty of other solutions how he could have found this. It's just a simple and nice example to demonstrate how Grafana could have helped him. Yeah, thank you very much for staying.